Oh, wait.
I don't want to get into it. I had a nitpicky question. Okay, go.
Does it make sense to bring one up to? We're back. We're all set, Mike? Good. Is there anyone who wants to make a statement, talk about their position or their feelings on this issue before we call for a vote or a motion?
I'll just give it quick.
Okay.
Okay. Matt mentioned the significance of using eminent domain. I completely agree with him. I have a number of concerns with regard to this. I have deep sympathy for the people of Mulberry Point and Tuttle's Point. I can't imagine going through what they've had to go through. I'm sure they're frustrated by having really 14 years, because this did start back in 2000. All this time go by and we really appear to have gotten nowhere. We've got engineering proposals that we haven't acted upon, but I don't think that gives this board the latitude to exercise eminent domain, specifically, primarily because we're putting the cart before the horse, in my opinion. The eminent domain should be what you do last. It should be one of the final pieces of the puzzle that you put together, not the first piece. And I know for most of you out there that live in Tuttle's Point and Mulberry Point, you feel, you know, these pieces of the puzzle keep changing and moving around, and different people get involved, like myself, and all I can say is I'm sorry. But from my perspective, first of all, I think the two sides are much closer together than you realize. I think there are a number of dissenters that have strong opinions, and I don't disagree with those strong opinions, but I do think that you are quite close together, and I hope that you will get back together and start negotiating in good faith. I think this proposal is significantly less invasive to the Indian Cove community than the one 2 years ago, and I think it would be a shame and frankly mean for you to deny the easement out of any sort of malice that you might feel toward the people across the cove. From my perspective, if you were to come back or try to go through this again, the things that are making it difficult for me to go through with eminent domain have a lot to do with the data. I don't know which 155 homes, and I've asked you to supply me with them. I'd like to know which people are going to be assessed. I'd like those people to know what they cost will be, updated costs. I'd like each of those people to respond, and I'd like to have a significantly higher response rate than we've had thus far. The environmental impact is a potentially large one, and it is one of the primary concerns over on the Indian Cove side. I'm sensitive to that, but at some point you have to leave that to the hands of the experts. Having said that, I don't believe that the quote-unquote experts have really vetted the project and done all that is necessary to get it done. So I would hope that something could be done, that you could figure out a way to do whatever needs to be done and have it not take another 4 or 6 years. And that's really it in a nutshell from my perspective.
Thank you, Ken.
You know, there's, to echo Ken, there's too many fragments here that haven't been pulled together and haven't been updated. We have an engineering report that's 4.5 years old. We have a health department study that's at least 10 years old, certainly with limited testing, that maybe 23% of the properties have been tested. We have open questions that have been alluded to before the break on the Connecticut Water Company, and they're being on board and what our costs are, the whole questions of percentages of people that are supporting this, and capping it off with who represents Indian Cove. I still am asking that question because we've had numbers that show deep divisions. I would hope as well that the communities involved, the sub-communities involved, because we are one community and that's called Guilford. And I would hope that the sub-communities could get together and resolve these and bring them to us. If they don't, I would certainly be open to revisiting this with updated statistics.
I think I somewhat made my points clear before, but I think it's, for me, it's survey info. I just don't think there's a representative number high enough to be able to really go on. The collaboration between the communities is, as has been already mentioned by my three colleagues, disappointing that that's not happening in Guilford. That, to me, is unfortunate and shocking. And due diligence. You know, from my profession and what I do is about due diligence and making sure that what you do, the long-term impacts, it's not just put it in, do it, and then worry about it 5 years, 10 years, 15 years later. There's a lot of information that should have been done. And the fact that it's, you know, there's a study that's 4 years old that nothing's been done on it, I don't get it. And I also am, you know, it's unfortunate for members of three communities to have to go this route. But eminent domain is too serious to make any kind of decision to do that, in my mind.
How about the health and safety of us down there?
Please. I'm going to add a couple of things to what I've already said, but I want to reiterate. My first inclination is that there ought to be water up there. There's been some discussion and concern about the environmental impact. I'm fairly confident that our town officials will address the issue relative to septic in a fashion that is satisfactory to the entire community. I want to talk for a moment about an agreement that was reached between the town, Connecticut Water Company, and the Indian Cove Association that was negotiated by the Executive Committee of the Indian Cove Association, as I understand it. There are some pretty substantial assurances in this document relative to protections for the residents of Indian Cove. Some may argue they're not strong enough. I will argue that if that's the case, why did your board feel comfortable negotiating this agreement and then taking it to the membership? It is not too late to go back and revisit that agreement. Is there more that can be reasonably granted to the Indian Cove Association to allow them to rejoin their neighbors as fellow community members? To me, reasonability, sound decision-making, and honest discourse is what should rule the day. I think we need to go back to the table and negotiate an agreement. Withholding water from another community is holding them hostage. Enough pontificating. I'm prepared to put a motion forward that the Board of Finance acts upon this petition and without prejudice does not recommend the initiation of eminent domain to acquire an easement from the Indian Cove Association at special town meeting at this time. I also recommend to the Board of Selectmen that they attempt to obtain all necessary easements for the proposed water main project and hold those in escrow conditioned upon eventual acquisition of the Indian Cove Association easement by negotiation for purchase or otherwise. At such time that the necessary easements are duly obtained, with the possible exception of the Indian Cove easement and possible other easements, then the Board of Finance encourages the petitioners to submit a new petition to request a special town meeting for the purpose of obtaining the remaining outstanding easements. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion on that? No. Call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No abstentions. Motion carries. We thank you for your patience. We're not done yet. Anyone who would like to address the board in public forum has the opportunity to do so now. Please come up. No town. Yes. By the way, that means there will be no town meeting next Tuesday, 17th. That is Tuesday.
My name is Carol Kelleher. I live at 139 Marshall Avenue in Mulberry Point. And I was president of the association 23 years ago. And we were talking about water then, hoping to get water down in Mulberry Point. And every time we make progress on it, we deal with the water company. Dennis has been very helpful. The water company gives us a price. Someone has negotiated grants for us. And then there's always another obstacle. And by the time we get to that obstacle, then the grant will disappear. It will cost us more money. We go to one board, they want information, so we work on that. And then when we get that done, they say, okay, you go to this board. And we've progressed for 23 years. We've done what we were told to do, but everybody, it's like a hot potato. Everybody just throws it in someone else's lap, and all of us are stuck down there with questionable water. And it gets very, very discouraging that somebody cannot step up to the plate here and get us all together instead of just tossing us from one board or one company to another. We really have a serious problem down there, and somebody has to help us solve it. And we're all residents of Guilford. We're here because we love Guilford. None of us want to move out of Mulberry Point, but we need water. And somehow somebody's got to help us with that. That's all.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Libby Kingsbury from, oops, wrong one.
Yep.
Libby Kingsbury from 120 Indian Cove Road, obviously in Indian Cove. I guess what strikes me most is that I think everyone in Indian Cove feels that they have had not nearly enough information. Certainly you guys feel that way. If you think you feel that way, it's worse, believe me. I didn't know till tonight that there were other easements involved in this. This is how little we've known. Yet the weight of this decision of these poor people that have no water is put on us, people that have no education, basically, about the situation. So we're asked to make a very important decision for people outside our association when we don't have the education to make an informed decision. It's not because we don't want people to have water. That's crazy. Of course we want our neighbors to have water. We don't want anyone suffering in our community and in our town. That's crazy, and I hate to hear that kind of language from you guys, and I hate to hear it in this room, because it does not exist. Maybe for some, you know, okay, maybe it exists, but I think the majority is sympathetic to it, but we don't have the kind of information or education in this kind of area to make this kind of decision. It's not that we don't want you to have water, that's nuts.
Thank you.
My comments are addressed to...
Name and address, please.
Pardon me?
Name and address.
Pardon me. Joan Hickey. I have been president of Mulberry Point. I've lived here for 30 years. I would like to address you gentlemen, and I wish there were more women on this zoning board and on the boards in Connecticut, but it seems like we have gentlemen here. I would like to challenge you. You have a problem, and we need leadership, and we need you to lead us. And I would like some definitive time frames of the things you want us to bring within a time frame and a date, and set us up to meet again so that we can present with you all of this research, all of this town effort. You have Dennis Johnson spending 20 years of his career fighting for this. You have every other town official. We want dates. We want leadership from you. Give us a date.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm happy to follow that one up. We found out through conversation with one of the board members, and we were very pleased that he gave up a good part of his Sunday to meet with us, we found out through that conversation that there was something new. The something new was, what about the other easements? And the answer to that was and is, that's from the petitioners who are asking for this to be done. And when someone says to us, and I believe this is really over the top, that it's a tactic on our part, the only reason we were forced to make this application, this ridiculous application to stick a water pipe under a road and then close and improve the road, was because after 18 months of negotiations, where Indian Cove negotiated with the town, they're not negotiating with us. The board should understand this. Once they negotiated with the town for an easement, we thought it was a done deal. Let me repeat it. We thought it was a done deal. Then it was voted down. Why? And you know what? We hearkened back to a conversation that the president of our association had with the then president and leaders of Indian Cove when they met with Dennis Johnson to discuss this, where there was an accommodation made to them for the shorter route because their community was not prepared due to a dispute within their own community, which is legitimate. That's for them to work out, to a less intrusive route. Intrusive? Putting a water pipe under the road? Okay, intrusive. Okay. And Susan Robbins can tell you, because she was there, that meeting was left on a positive note until 2 days later. And then you know what was missing, gentlemen? They wanted $100,000 and the town said, we're not going to pay it. One last item. Do you really, really think that people in our community are going to degrade our own septic systems and incur the cost that we're obliged to incur? Do you really believe that? Does anybody here believe that? That we're going to really do that? This environmental issue is a non-issue. You heard it from Dennis Johnson, not in those exact words, but he can tell you that he knows every well. I bumped into him one day and he said, oh, you're Mike Mizell, you have a XYZ well. He knows every one of the wells, gentlemen. There's no lack of due diligence on his part. What there is, there's a moving of the goalpost, and we don't like it, and we're not going away. That I can promise everyone.
Hello, my name is Tiffany Simons. I'm part of the Indian Cove Association. I really resent all these comments. I've been a part of this board. I was part of the negotiations on this easement. Generally, when one side wants something, they come with some sort of proposal, some sort of written starting point. We were just asked to draw up what you want. We want an easement. And every time we had to make an easement that pleased the people who were for the project on our side and those who were against it. Try making a document that pleases everyone. And then we voted on it. And here was the decision. And here we are today, being treated as, what are we, belligerent, sir?
Yes.
Belligerent, yeah. Well, I'm sorry, we are ready to negotiate and ready to talk.
That's what we
We don't need to be slandered.
Thank you. Anyone else? Chris?
There are a number of things I could speak to. Maybe I'll start with the $100,000. When we got the okay, there you go. The $100,000. You know, we didn't really understand that it was a utility easement. We just kind of thought, out of naivete, that it was one of these easements like you get a cell tower and you get a lot of money out of it. So, and we also thought that it was something that was going to be in negotiations, so that anything that we sent to the town, they would say, $100,000, they're crazy. Let's say that we're going to offer them this, you know. So there was no real communication between the parties at that point of us knowing and understanding what was going on. And eventually it came down to where the easement, you know, became, I made inquiries of a real estate appraiser, and he explained the whole process of how utility easements worked, and I went back and said, hey guys, you know, we were way out of line there. And so, you know, eventually over time it just came down to where it should be. And that's kind of the way a lot of this stuff goes, because we're not professional people in this field. And a lot of the people in Mulberry Point are very fired up about their project, and that's fine. But they need to calm down a little and understand that we're not, you know, we're not experts at this, and we're feeling our way through it. Another comment I will make is someone on the board asked about the data I had. All the data I have about the whole project, it comes from Dennis's office, and the well tests that I referenced, they were what Dennis gave me in the beginning of the 2012 project when I asked him about that. And I can document everything that I spoke about with town data, and there's a lot more that I didn't talk about. I also want to say that in my own experience, I worked for the Connecticut Water Company when they were building the Kelseytown treatment plant, and I was a field inspector for them. So I'm very aware of a whole range of problems that most of you people have no idea of when it comes to disturbing the earth to put pipes in. And I spent a lot of my time trying to verify and validate costs that were put into that project. And for the most part, it was low. The numbers were low. And this was validated when the engineer had an actual contractor finally come out and look at the job. And because of the narrow roads and a lot of the ledge and the awkward spots, it was very clear that the prices were low. So the town has kind of gone out of its way not to bring these things into a transparent public setting. And that's really the pivotal reason why we resist. We didn't decline the option for water because we don't want anyone to have water. We declined it because there's no transparency in the process, and we feel like we're being abused in that process. And I think it's Mr. Hoey, is that correct? You know, your interest is like, let's get the easement back out on the table. Well, the easement is not the real issue. The real issue is the scope of the entire project and how it's been developed. As your three colleagues have pointed out, it hasn't been done with due diligence. And that's what we really want. We want the due diligence. If the due diligence is done and the project is transparent and we can all see that, then we can say, okay, this makes sense, that makes sense, and the vote is a fair vote. But right now, the feeling tone, and it's enhanced by the attitude of the Mulberry Point people with their bullish approach to it. That's not going to work. You've got to come back to the table with the real data and the idea that you're going to make it equitable for everybody. It includes people who actually have good water and don't need water. Why do they have to pay $10,000 to millionaires? It makes no sense at all. There should be some part of the assessment process that's ethically based so that people who have no need can actually vote, yes, I want my neighbors to have water because now you've relieved me of robbing me of $10,000. And so these are the kinds of issues that have created the resistance in the Indian Cove Association and probably resistance that other people are experiencing. So I would hope that you would keep that bigger picture in mind as we go forward. Thank you.
I would like to just make a few comments. Maybe I'm reiterating what Mike said as far as the easements go. Well, you know, 3 of those easements are, of course, Tuttle's, Mulberry Point, Long Cove, automatic. Alan Oshana is on the corner, automatic. Dennis Johnson, myself, Joe Mazza sat with Mr. Fisher and made a handshake deal. So the easement issue, I think, is a non-issue, and we let it get bigger than it needed to get. The thing, if you go back in history, and Ken, you made comments like we were invading in Indian Cove. The feasibility study was done initially because the closest water connection point went through there. After we did that feasibility study and after estimates were brought up, and when Indian Cove said, we don't want to participate in that, they were pulled back. So we took it out of the equation from our standpoint. It lowered the cost of the project. So we weren't trying to drag them into something that they didn't need to be, if they didn't want to be. We weren't trying to do that. And the issues of transparency, I mean, this has been going on for multiple years. The easement that they asked for, that Dennis did negotiate, because we sat in his office one night with members of their executive committee, and everybody left there saying, we got to get together. We got to do weenie roast. We got to do this. It was great. 2 days later, okay, we'll do it for $100,000. So at that point, we said, look, we got to get out of this. And Nord, the attorney that was here, was brought into it to try to help represent. So I mean, that whole thing is being taken out of context, or it's just not, it's not coming through right. And so, you know, and even the cost per household, there's a lot of different ways. We looked at cost per household, we looked at frontage in front of your home, we looked at assessed values of the home, but Dennis looked at numerous programs around the state, and the best way to do it was on a cost per unit basis. So we agreed that that would be the way. Now, I mean, again, Indian Cove, they weren't going to spend a dime, so they may not have agreed with that, but we weren't asking them to do it. I mean, Chris happens to have a house in Tuttle's in Indian Cove. He only gave his residents of Tuttle's Point. So, I mean, this is terribly disappointing. We don't recognize the public health benefits, the safety benefits, the fire benefits. Whether there's X number of particles, it really doesn't matter. The people have indicated they'd like to have fresh water like everybody else. So mine's not as bad as somebody else's. I don't really care. I want to get fresh water. One of the things that wasn't brought up at all is when we have power failures and we don't have any water. If we had the city water, we would have that during that period. We had snowstorms that did it, and Irene and Sandy that did it. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why people want it. It wasn't just the health issue. And that was not looked at correctly or properly. So, I mean, I'll get off this. I think it's, I mean, I would love to actually ask the Indian Cove. I mean, it's their 900 feet of road, and we recognize that. But when they negotiated the 10 points that took 8 months, 12 months of time, you're saying whatever the period was, we thought we were negotiating in good faith. And it was a back and forth. So, and I don't really recall if we went to them with 3 things, 5 things, but, you know, when they asked for the pipe to be sized properly for future expansion, when they asked for the water spigot, I'm calling it that, I mean, these are things they asked for. They got, it was put in there. So if there were other things that they still had that they objected to, it was never brought forward. We met all the different things that they needed. And I just, you know, in closing again, it blows my mind. Town roads and state roads, it's automatic. We don't even think about it. And the fact that we have a road here that happens to be private is stopping the whole thing. And that's a real crime. I can't believe it. Thank you.
Bill Mann, Indian Cove. I'd just like to say that our board has to follow the rules of the Cove, the incorporation laws. They have to take the issue to a vote, and so you should respect our vote. Thank you.
Pam Corbett, 75 Highland Avenue, Indian Cove. And I live in the house I grew up in. We used to have a grid. There were 7 of us. We had a grid on when we showered and when we used water, and it was difficult. Last week, we ran out of water twice, and that was really unpleasant. When this project started, I was pro-water. I would actually still love to have water up on Highland Avenue, Bay Street. The issue that I have, well, there were 2. One, I have to confess, was sort of an emotional issue, is when it became them and us, and some of the vocabulary became insulting, and I felt that some of the tactics were strong-arming and bullying. I changed my mind about the project. I haven't changed my mind about wanting water, but I just find this very distasteful that we're arguing like this. And so I also think that, you know, one name keeps coming up, Dennis Johnson. It seems as though, you know, in the question of whether he's done due diligence or not, it makes me wonder, does he need help with this? Does he have, because, you know, I'm a nurse, I'm always hearing, oh, they didn't do this, and I'm saying, well, I have this many patients. So does Dennis Johnson have the staff he needs to do this project and do due diligence to it? And finally, well, 2 more things. Number 1 is that those houses on Marshall Avenue were very small cottages. And they're very beautiful homes now. I think they're all really beautiful. But I can't imagine that you put that much money into building homes when you were questionable about what kind of water supply you had, and the condition of that water, and the volume of that water. And the same thing goes for Long Cove. Yes, it's on ledge. It's always been on ledge. That hasn't been a plate that's moved in there. That's always been there. And I feel badly that they don't have water. I wouldn't build a house of that volume on a piece of property whose water supply was questionable. And lastly, well, the environmental concerns, obviously, because we don't know how much water we use, because some of us are saying we don't have water. So if we don't have water, we're not using water, how do we know how much more we're going to use if we have unlimited access to it? And the last thing is that I think that at this point we need assistance with mediation. I think that the town needs to step up, or somebody needs to step up, and there should be mediation. Perhaps not the same people who have been involved, and professionals who can take us through this. This is the first I've heard they're blasting. Now you're blasting behind my house. This is the first I've heard of that. Well, no. Well, blasting is a word that was used. At any rate, it doesn't disturb me how you do it. I just need to know that the environment's going to be okay, and that my neighbors who can't afford to hook up aren't going to have issues with their existing wells. And I think that we need assistance with mediation on this project, and that there should be some kind of team made to look at this with, you know, maybe different sets of folks looking at it with some leadership, and perhaps Dennis Johnson can get the help he needs to do due diligence. That's all. Thank you.
Sue Robbins. Oh, sorry. Gee, I've watched everybody do this. Sue Robbins, 798 Mulberry Point Road. Everyone's tired. it's late in the night, so I'm going to make this brief. But I want to start by saying that you're all volunteers. We're all citizens of our neighborhoods. And we've all worked hard to try and move this forward for many, many years. And as you've heard before, it's a long road we've been on. We're all tired. But that doesn't change the fact that we're not giving up, because we know how important and how difficult this is. It's tough, but we can't give up because it's the right thing to do. And I've always told my kids, it may be tough, but if you believe in it and you understand that it's important and it will help the good of most, you don't give up. And I appreciate everything Dennis has been allowed to do through the town, so I thank the town for letting him do that to get us this far, but we can't give up. So the one thing that I think we all have to take away from this is to remember, we live in Guilford, where we respect one another and we care about each other. We can agree to disagree. And I don't like the dogfight that all of us are in. By choice, not by choice. But we've got to get back to basics here and remember that we live in a town that we all care about one another. And we've let this become more important than each other. And Pam, or whoever else that I've known from high school, Matt, let's work together and stop fighting and agree to disagree on some points, but not let us stop doing the right thing and getting water to people that need it. You don't have to believe we do, we do. So I leave the charge, and I appreciate all of these board members who give of their time to listen to us and do their due diligence and be respectful to all of us to take our plea seriously. And rather than sit here another 4 years from now, like we did in the past, let's not do that again. Let's sit down and work together and promise one another that we will get through this so everyone is happy, but that we have the basic right of water. We're not asking for toxic waste to be run through. We just want water. And when you can't flush your toilets and take a shower and do all the things that everybody else who has water and no problems, it's tough. But it doesn't mean we should quit. So we ask, and I ask and ask and beg of you, Joe, Dennis, Matt, Mike, Ken, let's sit down and stop spinning our wheels and get this done so everyone's happy on all sides, because that's what matters.
Hearing up.
That was so well done. I shouldn't really follow up, but I'm sorry to take your
Oh,
time.
no,
I didn't intend to
Nope.
talk, but I'm getting riled up here. So for the record, Karen Stark, Guilford, North Reeves. I think we need to move forward. I like the fact that you said maybe we need mediation. I was a proponent of water because I myself have water issues. And I was at one of the first meetings at someone's house when Dennis was there, and my question to him, and my only concern was that, are we going to have is my street going to be paved? Because if it was, I was thinking, well, do I really want water or not? Because one of the reasons why I chose where I live was because I didn't want paved roads. But nonetheless, I've been a proponent of having water, and I've seen all the emails and I've heard a lot of discussions. I have friends and so forth who, my relationship has changed with them in my association because of some of the nonsense that has been said. I have, soon after this whole thing started stirring, I realized that it's never going to get anywhere because
It's money and it's development. There's a fear of people having to spend a lot of money in taxes and all that, or development. And then when those two things didn't work, then this environment talk comes up. And it's a lot of excuses. Even though I live in Indian Cove and all that, I must say we do need help, because you're right. This everything moves. And every time something else is done, then by that time it's 4 years later, and yes, then the data has to change. But I mean, it's been unfair, but it's been unfair on this part of Indian Cove, I think. And we do need to talk. We have to accept, we have to move forward. And one of the things that, I don't know the facts, but in discussions I heard that there was a little beach into our Indian Cove a long time ago, and it was ours, or we had rights to buy it. But we chose not to because of money. So it was voted down. We're not going to buy it. And so now the town bought it. And you know what happened? Now it's a public beach. And now all the people who didn't want to spend money and so forth, oh no, we're going to have all this, why spend this money? It's sort of ours, and we shouldn't worry about people coming. Well, now, every day, every weekend and so forth, there are at least 10 cars parked in this public beach now because we didn't spend the $5,000 that we could have paid to buy it. But the point is, we need to move forward. We need to talk. We need mediation or help, like Joan mentioned to you, because there's too many blocks. It's, people don't want to spend the money in Indian Cove. They're worried about development and now environment and so forth, and it's never going to go anywhere. And, unless someone else steps in, or unless, really people do sit down and say, okay, we'll give you this and talk.
I know I spoke before about the R2 overlay zoning, and I know people in those neighborhoods were adamantly against it. I'm wondering, would you be willing to look at the R2 overlay zoning before the water comes instead of after?
Because that's a very important issue, and people in Indian Cove, they're not bad people. They feel the way they feel. They don't want their neighborhood to change. They don't want to see the big oversized homes. Maybe not all of them, but many that I've talked to. So I think the R2 overlay zoning is something that really seriously needs to be looked at. That would solve a lot of my concerns. I don't have a water problem. I live in Tuttle's Point. I don't have much of a voice, and people have had a bullying nature. I speak in peril because people will probably, look the other way and give me dirty looks in my neighborhood. But I have the right to feel the way that I feel about the neighborhood. Can't speak for itself. I mean what I say about that. So you want the water, I understand that, but what are you willing to give back? That's my question. And I think the town has a responsibility, because in some ways the town has put us into this mess, because their zoning allows for bigger and bigger homes. And I will tell you, I was on that committee that I studied many of the residences, and I studied them in terms of the zoning that was being suggested against the zoning that exists. And the homes that are developed down there are nowhere near the size that the current zoning would allow. Matter of fact, there's one property that's an acre and a quarter. Large percentage of it is marsh. If you take away the well to septic distance, that house could be enormous. And I don't think people understand that. And that adds to greater runoff. And where does the greater runoff go? Into the marshes, the wetlands, the inland wetlands. And then where does that get to, guys? Sound. Somebody's got to care. I am sympathetic to your needs for water. I am sympathetic to that, but you have to be sympathetic to the needs of the environment too. So there has to be a give and a take. And I hope the town will consider reopening that zoning study if this is going to move forward. Otherwise, you're going to end up in a situation where you brought in the water and oh, now we have a big problem. Let's do it before. Let's plan.
Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye.